I would like to introduce a very wonderful human, someone who is near and dear to my heart. She is actually part of what has helped bring this podcast together to help others. Her husband and her have such servant hearts, and they have been through the journey of mold just like I did. And when she came into my office as a patient, we just connected. And together with her vision and her talent, we have brought this wonderful podcast together to help others. So, this is Allison. Allison, welcome to the show. We are so delighted to have you here. We're going to do our best not to cry through this entire podcast because both of us have been through mold journey. And for anyone who is struggling with mold illness, you know that it is quite the trauma, and it takes a lot of healing to even be able to talk about it into public. And so to have someone in here whom is willing to share their heart, their experience, only for the benefit of helping other people is such a blessing. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself, so they can kind of get to know you, what you did before you became sick with mold, maybe how mold changed the trajectory of your life, and whatever you're comfortable in sharing.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's super exciting. And as you know, this is near and dear to my heart because it's affected my entire life. It's affected my family's life. When you ask what was life like before mold, I have had it for so long that there's a part of me that doesn't really remember. I have to go all the way back to, I think, when I was a kid. And I guess a teenager, because, I started having some things when I was a teenager, but more so, I think that I probably had, I know I was a dreamer. I loved music. I still love music and super happy-go-lucky child. I'm realizing now, that I had some anxieties, but, I had a wonderful childhood. And life before mold really and truly was more so in my younger years and teenage years, because it started for me probably when I was in my early 20s. It could have been before that. It could have even started in my home that I grew up in. But I started having issues when I got my dream job at the time, which was when I was probably 19, and I wanted to become a singer. That's all I wanted to do. Love music. My dream was to become a singer. I wanted to sing at this incredible place that I grew up going called Lake Junaluska in North Carolina. And I saw the singers every single summer. And so that's what I wanted to be. And I was able to try out and I made it. And it was a literal dream come true. And at the same time, I was going to college, and for me, everything just really started with, I think it was a first exposure at this campground place that I became a singer.
Yeah.
So, and I know this to be true because when I showed up with all my bags, I was so excited, showed up with all my bags and came into the first room. We kind of stayed in like a really small, almost like an apartment complex. There were about 10 apartments. And this was in North Carolina where it's notorious for raining and all of that. And I showed up in the one bedroom where we were all meeting. And we were going to kind of get the lowdown for the summer. And we came in and everybody was kind of talking and laughing. And they were even showing each other spots around the room. And I just thought, what is going on? And when they first got there, there were mushrooms growing out of the carpet.
Oh
And
my.
so that started kind of a summer full of I didn't know anything about mold at that point. I didn't even know to be afraid of the mushrooms. I knew that it was not a good thing. But that's probably the first time that I started getting sick.
And so did your sickness come on instantly, or was it slow and kind of ramped up? And what were you thinking when this started happening?
So it definitely was slow. It it ramped up, meaning, I first started having symptoms like I was getting sick all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my voice, and I had never lost my voice before. I lost my
Mm-hmm.
singing voice. And that's what I was there to do. I feel like now looking back, it affected my brain way
Mm-hmm.
more than I realized in the moment. Because I think when you're 20, no matter what happens, you're just still kicking and you're still going and you're still
Mm-hmm.
trying to kind of do what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing, and you want to have fun, during
Right.
that time. But there was no doubt that I also went through some other emotional things, like my parents got a divorce. So there were some big emotional traumas that happened. But I do also believe that it affected that. I don't know exactly how that works.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no doubt that it was harder on me because of that. I felt more emotional, but I think I started just attaching that to who I was, which is really not okay. It was really hard for me. So instead of seeing that as I was going through something, because I didn't know that I was going through something,
Mm-hmm.
um, I started thinking, well, maybe I'm just not, this, or I'm not that. Just like
Oh.
everybody else was able to stay healthy and strong, and I was getting sick often. And then it translated into when I went back to college. I was sick all the time. I was getting sinus infections. That sort of moved into my first diagnosis of insulin resistance, and that was a just about horrendous experience
Mm-hmm.
because nobody could tell me what was going wrong, and I literally
Mm-hmm.
could not get up and out of bed. I did, but I could not get up and out of bed. And I kept telling myself that I was the problem because I
Oh.
didn't know what else to do. No doctors were telling me anything. I wasn't going to a psychologist at that point because I didn't necessarily feel like I needed it. But all the doctors were saying, you're fine. You look great. Everything's just fine.
And
So,
me, and you said something that really resonates with me. You
mhm.
said it made your parents were going through a divorce, and you
Yeah,
just attached being emotional and
yeah.
depressed to that scenario and thinking that's who you were.
Hmm.
If I had not been a functional medicine provider when I got diagnosed with mold, I don't
Right.
know where I would have ended up. I mean, I have,
Yeah.
but I knew that I had these new onset symptoms, and my number one and my
Hmm.
first symptom was this
Yeah.
black hole depression,
Oh, wow.
and I was sitting there and I
Yeah.
would tell my husband, I would be sitting at the kitchen table and just, I mean, don't have the energy to lift my arms,
Right.
and I would be like just slumped over on the table and just laying there like, I'm just like, and
Yeah.
I would look at my husband and I'd go, I am so depressed.
Hmm.
I am so depressed. And,
Yeah.
and at this time, all of my children were thriving. My business was
Okay.
thriving. My practice was thriving.
Right.
And this little message kept going in my head going, what changed to make this happen? But I
Hmm.
only knew because I was a provider and a functional medicine provider that I
Right.
had that change,
Right.
and I knew to look for that change. So it
Right.
put me searching. Had I not been that, I can't
Right.
even imagine what it would have been for someone who's young, going to
Right.
college, starting a career, chasing
Hmm.
a dream,
Yes.
and then themselves not probably being secure with whom and what you were,
Right.
and
Well, you're
how,
already a bit insecure. And so it starts to really speak to your identity, which you've really
Mhm,
not fully formed yet.
mhm,
You're allowing all the things of the world to some degree. And
mhm,
then when you start getting sick and you start attaching to that, not only do you have the physical symptoms, I do think that there's a part of being young where so for me, I feel like I could, because I didn't know,
mhm,
I was constantly just getting back up and
mhm.
moving forward. But I think where I hear you say, with your experience in the medical field, you were able to sort of go down that road and really start searching. I didn't, that's a gift. That really is a gift. And of course, it's why you're a gift to me. But it's a gift to have that, because for me, I was just flailing and looking at everything, and not even at that point, not even knowing what mold was. I mean, the connection didn't happen for me until maybe 15 or 17 years later that it was mold.
Oh, wow. So tell
Yeah.
us how you figured out that you may have been experiencing all of these symptoms for so long
Yeah.
and didn't have a clue for 15 years.
Yeah, so I think that for my personality, like I said, I just kind of was constantly just continuing. I would wake up. I mean, I've figured out too now that I've had anxiety in the past, not as extreme as it was recently, that we can talk about at some point. But I think I just was constant. It was almost like high functioning, where I would just get out of bed, and because I couldn't pinpoint it, I just kept going. And so, and the other thing is, of course, your brain shifts so much. And I think it's a slow burn. It's like, what do they talk about the frog, putting the frog in the cold water? And he stays in. If you put him in the hot, he'll jump out. And for me, it just was like, got a little bit warmer and a little bit warmer. And my first sort of big diagnosis it was insulin resistance. And I just could not believe it.
I can't believe that either, considering how small you are.
Well, I've always pretty much been this size. And I will say, so the summer, to sort of go back to that point, that summer I did gain 20 pounds, maybe 25 pounds. But the other girls did too. And so I don't know if everybody was affected by it, or if we were sort of holed up, that summer because it was rainy and all of that. But I definitely, like, I would go to work out, would never have results, would feel terrible after I worked out, didn't feel better. So and I, of course, was able to lose the weight after that, but that was kind of coming back to college and things like that. And I was able to work out a little bit and see some benefit. But the diagnosis for insulin resistance, that came because I was having just this chronic, when I would wake up, I just thought, I am absolutely exhausted. I cannot get up. I felt really emotional, but I wasn't sure that it was emotional. I thought I was a bit crazy, and I didn't say anything, because you don't go to your doctor and say, I feel crazy, or at least at that time, that
You've got
wasn't a
enough
thing.
doctors telling you you're crazy. You don't need to.
Right, that you're totally fine and nothing's wrong and your numbers are normal. I had even been told a couple, and with some different doctors, that I had a tumor, and the tumor wasn't actually there. And so there were just some misdiagnoses. And for this was just so questionable, but it made all the sense in the world. So I called my gynecologist and I said, okay, this is what happened. I ate a bowl of cream of wheat. And this is, I was eating healthy, but not as healthy, of course, as I have been in the last 20 years. And I said, I feel really weird right after it. And I was clammy. I felt like I was sweating at the same time. My skin was really cold. And I felt an immediate, like, emotional change. And she said, well, have you ever done I can't remember what it's called. It's a diabetic test that you go in and do.
Glucose
The
tolerance
glucose
test?
tolerance
Yeah.
test. Yes. Had never done that. So they sent me in. I did that for 3 hours. And I mean, I was like a zombie, and my fingers were purple, and it came back that I was hypoglycemic. And they said, you're going to have to change everything. You're going to need to go on medication because you're going to have diabetes before you know it. And I literally just thought, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I had just moved to Nashville. So my incredible endocrinologist put me on medication. I say incredible because she's absolutely wonderful. When I left that appointment, I just thought, there is no way. I am not going to be on, I think I was on metformin or something. And I just thought, there's no way I'm going to do this.
You may
So,
connect this to mole for you. Okay, so one of the things when people come in my office and they say, I have gained weight so fast without reason, I have not changed anything,
Right,
the first thing I look for is mold. If they're
Right.
talking about abnormal weight gain and fatigue, they're probably about 80% likely to have mold.
Wow.
Okay, and now most people, because thyroid is in the press, will come in
Yeah.
and say, I think my thyroid is messed up,
Right.
but it's really not their thyroid. The
Okay.
reason reason the body is doing that is because the body's solution to pollution is dilution. So you're in
Okay.
that contaminated home or camp at that
Right.
summer.
Right.
It's full of mycotoxins. So your body, in order to not get overwhelmed by those mycotoxins, it builds
Right.
fat cells and stores them in the mycotoxins.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so
Okay.
that excess fat created insulin resistance. But
Okay.
also, one of the things that was happening is mold causes issues with temperature regulation.
Mm,
Okay,
yep.
and so, and the least little trigger, whether it is a rise in blood sugar or,
Okay.
a small stress, a
Right.
sleepless night, is going to
Right.
cause those temperature dysregulation. Like I used to change clothes.
Mm-hmm.
True story. I used to change clothes 12 to 16 times a night because I would
Wow.
drench. I would drench through
Okay.
my pajamas. I had to put plastic bags on
Oh
my
my
pillows.
gosh.
I did because
What?
they were molding, and I would
Okay.
lay layers of beach towels out on my bed every night and a whole
Right.
pile of pajamas at the bottom of the bed because I
Right.
knew at night when I went to bed, for some reason, I had these incredible night sweats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would just constantly change clothes all through the nights.
Wow.
So what's happening to you, which happens to so many people,
Mm-hmm.
is that the allopathic medicine world is knowing what they know, and they're not familiar with mold illness.
Right.
So
Right.
they're looking for the disease that they're aware of that goes with your symptoms.
Right.
And so a
Right.
lot of people get all these crazy diagnoses
Mm-hmm.
that they probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Right.
But
Right.
anyway, okay, so with talking about your career,
Mm-hmm.
so what you shared something very heartfelt with me.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how mold affected your career, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm 100% comfortable. It's
Okay.
emotional. Because my dream, my heart always led me to singing. I
Hmm.
felt it. It wasn't just something that I went and learned. It was something that I had from a young child, and it was the only thing I think in like middle school and high school that I dreamt of. Everybody else was thinking of going into this or that, and every time somebody asked me, it was, I'm going to be a singer. I'm going to go and I'm going to go to Nashville and I'm going to sing. And that's what I did. And for me, thankfully, right after that, I was able to come to Nashville. And gosh, this is typically not heard of, but, or at least back then. But, when I moved to Nashville, I got together with a couple girls and we put together a demo and we got a record deal. We got a
Oh,
record deal with DreamWorks Records, and it was just more than a dream come true, because I couldn't have even dreamed, what I went through. And even though we went through some hard things, we did an album. We did a full radio. Actually, we did two radio tours all across the United States. We did a couple of videos. It's how I met my husband, Doc. He shot I think it was our second or third video. Um, and it literally was just my dreams literally in reality. And so for me at that point, I wasn't really having many symptoms. I wasn't really having any issues. DreamWorks ended up closing because of some things that were happening behind the scenes, and everybody kind of scattered and had to go and sort of find wherever they wanted to go next. And I had a couple of options. Um, at that point, I still, didn't really fully know who I was. And so I kind of allowed my manager to give me some advice that just took me down a different path. And that path was trying to find a different deal instead of sort of moving right into another one. And you talk about stressors, trying to find another deal. It was already a huge stressor to get there, and finding, especially on my own, because I was ready to do something solo. That was a big stressor because it's very different than going into your job and being able just to kind of move forward. And so I worked really hard for probably 5 years and tried to get a deal. I moved to LA for just a really short amount of time, and then came back, for weeks, and then came back. And for me, that was all I was going to do. There was no changing. And so I was able to go into an audition and got a job with an organization called Women of Faith. And I became a worship leader. And it was absolutely incredible. Another dream job. And while I was there, I started having some symptoms, and the symptoms that popped up for me were more so in sinus infections, chronic, constant sinus infections. I had gotten a hold of the insulin resistance because I got off sugar. And I got off sugar pretty much immediately, and she was able to take me off the medication. So I was able to balance everything with that. And so everything kind of came back. I got married to my husband, Doc, and we lived in a home that I didn't even think, I didn't put two and two together, but we lived in a home that had been flooded. It was a 19 built in the 1930s. It had been flooded probably multiple times. And so I'm sure there was just mold seeping and up through everything and in the carpets and in the walls. And at that point, I just was continuing to get sick. And again, I just kind of kept going and kept going. And it wasn't really until we moved to another home, which we really never found it in this other home, where I just was constantly sick. I was constantly not feeling well. I went to a few different doctors. They told me, well, you might have some adrenal, this and that. And I got on something called biocidin for about, I think, 6 weeks. And I mean, it sent me into a place that I just didn't really know existed. I felt terrible every day. I felt worse again. And I thought, gosh, this is happening again. And
So who led you to biocidin?
so there's a wonderful doctor. Her name is Jamie Arroyo, and she's in Hermitage. She's an incredible doctor. And at that point, I don't know that it was that she didn't know about mold illness, or if it was just that she had not treated people. But I started because of that, because she thought when I came back, she was completely shocked. She thought you should absolutely be feeling better, after all of this. And so I did some research because she wasn't really sure what was going on because, again, all my test results were coming back fine. So I did so much research, started putting two and two together. And I bought a mold test online and I brought it to her and I said, will you please test me for mold? I don't know anything about it, but I think this is what's going on with me. And she said, I have never tested anybody and for this. And so, yeah, so she sat with me. She read all the instructions while I was sitting there and she said, okay, let's do it. And so I went home and I got tested for it and I came back. She also tested me for Lyme. And then she sent me to Dr. Kalb, who's here. It was a wonderful doctor. And then he had to, I think, finish the Lyme testing. And then he had said, there's no doubt that he said, you don't have Lyme. And, he really didn't say I had mold. And so I did more research behind the scenes and I researched CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And I just thought there's no doubt this is what I have. And I was really trying not to be doctor at that point, but it was very obvious. And so I sent him a message and he said, well, of course that's what you have. But I was left with, what do I do now? So,
Because me, I didn't even know what it was until I went to functional medicine school. And so had this happened to me, just being a general practitioner and not a functional medicine provider,
right.
I would have had no clue where to turn. And I'd never heard of it. One had ever said anything to me.
Right.
What put that little bug in your ear that says, hey, you probably have mold? Because I bet the majority of the population out there doesn't even think it's real.
That's true. There's so many people. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of couples in particular that go through, one person has it and the other spouse doesn't understand it, doesn't believe in it. And that kind of gets into, as you and I both know, another conversation because that's the emotional toll that it takes. And so the one thing I think really and truly, the only thing that I can attribute it to is that I researched and I looked up mysterious symptoms. I looked up all of my symptoms. I tried to link them with something. And really, the only thing that ever kept coming up, and it wasn't SIRS at the time, but it was mold. It kept connecting me with mold. And then after that, I just kept researching, and that's where the SIRS came up. And so I did the SIRS symptoms checklist, and I had all the symptoms except one. And I thought, they say that if you check, I think there's like 36, and then they're all grouped into boxes.
Correct.
And if you check at least 8, if you're an adult, it says you're more than likely to have mold, and so you need to get
98% chance.
yes,
Yeah.
which is unbelievable because the symptoms, they go from things like ordinary, everybody could have, to very specific, like static shock. I can't think of the others because, of course, what it does to your brain, but even like memory things. But all the mysterious things that you say that you have are on this one document. And it was like a big check for me. And so at that point, also because we weren't really moving forward or doing anything to treat SIRS, I thought I've got to find somebody. And so that's when I connected with Dr. Heyman, who's out of Virginia. And the way that I connected with him was, again, I did a whole bunch of research, and he had put 4 hours of physician training on his website. And I can't remember if it was through YouTube or what. And every time I would have an episode, which an episode for me was that somehow I had been exposed maybe to more mold, and I would end up on the couch, almost like I had had 5 drinks and could not get up, and would feel sleepy and just kind of very much out of sorts. And so I would press play and I would listen and listen and listen. And, part of it didn't stick because from a brain standpoint, there's a whole lot that you just can't remember. It's very frustrating. It's beyond frustrating. So that is kind of where I took my first step, I think, to finding the right doctor at the time for me, because really there weren't any other doctors. And I mean, I can kind of go back to, you had asked me about my career. And I don't want to just negate that. I think we kind of went on to some other things, but for me, again, that is all I saw myself ever doing. And because of all of the physical symptoms, it's the only thing that I thought I could do. And so once I started having just chronic sinus infections to where it was really affecting me, and it was affecting me emotionally as well, but I don't think that I was recognizing that at all, again, because I was just continuing to go. Singing takes work. You've kind of done all the work, but you still have to warm up. You still have to get ready. I felt like the stress of getting ready and the stress of showing up was taking such a toll on me that I had to take a break when I had my daughter. So it had nothing to do with her. She was just amazing. She was easy to travel with. She was wonderful because I was traveling every weekend and taking her with me. But the toll that it was taking, I also started recognizing that my voice was not in shape, even after I would do all the things to get it in shape. And so I think I also started kind of telling myself, you're not doing as well as you used to do, and you are losing your voice. And of course, when you're telling yourself that, you're feeding yourself something negative instead of, I'm going to keep moving, your voice is fine. And so when I took that break, that's when I started to kind of recognize I just wasn't feeling good sort of all the time. And it was taking more of an emotional toll. Like I was feeling more emotional, more so maybe like mood swings, not extreme, but some mood swings. And at that point, I decided that I could not go back. I tried here and there and went out on the road with a couple of people that I actually was working with. So because I have a performance background, I started coaching other artists. So what I did, I think, and this is the hard part, just so that I could continue to work, continue to help our family grow, and stay afloat, I started to coach other artists. And it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, but it was what I needed to do. But I was also limiting myself. I wish that I could have just stayed in and kept singing and kept doing what I love to do. But my mindset that was really limiting was telling me, you can't do that anymore.
So do you think mold took your career?
100%. Nothing else did except for mold. And when I say that, this is where the emotions come. Um, it is it is beyond sad. I want to say it's sad,
Yeah.
but it's beyond sad because it took almost like my lifeline, because I feel like God gave me
A
my
gift.
voice, a gift. And for me not to be able to use it was hard, but also not to be able to feel strong in what I was doing. And I
Right.
watched every other person in my life that I had been on the road with continue their singing career. And I watched other people get deals. And I watched other people continue.
We're going to have to
And
get
I watched, yes, thank you. I watched other people. I watched them be happy. Thank you. I watched their happiness. I was sad. That was my identity. That brought up that brought up a different issue that, I really need to figure out who my identity is and what my identity is, because I did put all of my stock in being a singer because I had done it since I was little. And so everything was about singing for me. And I think with my personality of just trying to keep going and continue to, like, coaching was the next thing, but I was limiting myself and I didn't know how to get out of it. And I don't think that your brain, because now that I know that this affects your brain so much, it still it still affects me to this day.
as a provider, you could probably help me help other people. Every day someone comes into my clinic and they lose jobs, they lose marriages, there are children. Like, I've got a little girl now, her mother's like, she's struggling to learn to read. We found out she's got mold. They lose financially because it's expensive to remediate mold.
It is.
And I've walked the walk too. I didn't lose my career over it, thanks be to God.
Yeah.
But I remember one time when I was walking down the hall with another doctor who was actually a surgeon who left allopathic medicine to do functional medicine because he got mold and nobody could figure out what was wrong with him, and he got
Okay.
he got disgruntled with the system, I guess you might say, or disappointed in the system.
Right.
And he looked at me and he said, your life will never be the same. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to allow that to happen. My life
Right.
is going to be the same. He says, this will change you forever. And it has, it has directed my career.
Right.
It took your career, but it has directed my career. But my career every day is seeing so much tragedy.
Right.
So if you could say something, because the whole point of this podcast is to help other people who are maybe where we have been,
Right.
to find hope, to hang on, to know you can get through this. There
Right.
is another side. You can survive mold.
Right. Literally survive it.
You
Right.
can survive
Right.
mold. So what would you tell people or someone to just help them? Are you okay today, even though?
Well, that's sort of what I was going to say, just to kind of let everybody know. I have been through, this is my second protocol. And just to be very clear, my first protocol I was not able to complete due to, as you know, a medical trauma that did not have anything to do with mold. And it happened to do, just really quickly, with a very simple sinus procedure. Here I am 25 years later, still trying to fix the sinuses. And my allergist said, you don't have any allergies, which you just cannot even imagine because of how allergic I feel to a lot. There's some things I'm not allergic to and other things, and I get sick from it. And so he said, I think you should go have this procedure. And I did, because I was desperate, And I think there's a lot of desperation when it comes to mold illness, because you've either been sick for so long or you have been so sick. And so many people have said, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, that you just are at a place of desperation. So for me, I am at a great place. I'm at a wonderful place, but I had this horrible medical trauma that happened. I almost bled out from this sinus procedure that I had where there shouldn't have been any bleeding, and almost died because I bled so much. And then was taken to the ER. They could not stop the bleeding for 5 months, for 5 hours, and kept me overnight, sent me home, and I started bleeding again 3 days later. I was sent back and was completely unconscious. They gave me a blood transfusion and then emergency surgery to fix all of that. And so I had to stop the VIP, which is the vasointestinal peptide. And honestly, I was feeling, I don't know that I had felt that good in probably, let's see, 25 years probably. Part of me was thinking, I don't think I've ever felt this good ever. And I was so excited. I had titrated up about 3 months or so. I don't remember exactly. And then I was on the full dose, and I was on the full dose for about a month, and I was supposed to be on it for a year. And that's when this medical trauma happened. So I had to stop. And then the doctor that I had, who I dearly, dearly loved because he was wonderful, he started practicing a little bit differently. And I didn't really fit at that point because of where I was. I didn't really fit within his practice anymore. And so I sort of let everything go because this was such a medical trauma, and I went through some major anxiety and panic for about 2 years, was on 9 different medications. It was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And kind of came back around to once this one doctor who was very kind, she was a functional doctor. We weren't even talking about mold because we weren't even there yet. She decided to retire, and they mentioned you. And I just remember coming into the office and you mentioning mold, and then you talking to me about Dr. Shoemaker and Dr. Neil Nathan, which I've done research on both of them. And that is what hooked me with you because I don't want to just go one route or the other because there's so many different, ways that you can go. There's a lot of discrepancies on how you actually go through a protocol, and everything that you said that you did, not just because you were in front of me, but everything that you said really hit kind of all the checkpoints for me. So to kind of come back around to what should another patient or a mom who has a child, I first things first is to really listen to your body, listen to your child's body, because if something is mysterious, it's probably something. I would also suggest, obviously, find the right doctor, and sometimes it takes going to multiple doctors. And I would also suggest, even if you are curious, to at least get tested. The test is not that expensive in the scheme of things. It's not that expensive to find out that you have mold. It is a long road. I think that when you go into the journey back to desperation, you're desperate. And I think you need some things around you, and that is an incredible doctor like you, or wherever you are. Finding a doctor who is very literate in how Dr. Neil Nathan treats, but also Dr. Shoemaker, because as you can obviously sort of tell everyone why that is so important. That's really important when you are talking to doctors. You can interview doctors, make sure that they're functional, make sure that they believe in mold illness. There's a lot of times people have Lyme. And they think it's mold, or they have mold and they think it's Lyme, but those two kind of run parallel with each other. They're not the same thing, but they run parallel. And a lot of times someone with mold has Lyme. A lot of times with Lyme, someone has mold. I think the first thing after finding a doctor is make sure that you find someone who has healed from mold, so that you have somebody that not just holds your hand through it, but I right now am speaking with probably at least 6 or 7 other women who are going through mold, either with themselves or their children. And I can't give them all the answers, but I can say, me too, I've been through this. And when it feels so devastating. And when you get that next either step, like you have to figure out your home, or let's say you've tested your home and you've gotten the results, you really need someone to be able to I think, deal with the emotional side. I think a counselor is really important who deals with people with chronic health issues, because it takes such a toll on you and your family. And so I would suggest those things.
So
Yeah.
there was a point in time that even me struggling with my mold illness, and I always said, now, I mean, I think you were pretty sick, but I always said, I'm the sickest mold patient I ever had,
Yeah.
and there
Yeah.
were points in time, my journey was about 2.5 years,
Yeah.
and there were points in times where I felt like I had worked for months and not felt any better whatsoever,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I would lose hope. And I would remember one time, two different occasions. One time I was actually taking Dr. Shoemaker's certification, and it was like real homework. We had Blackboard and all those things we had to do, and where you had to
Yeah.
go and comment on other students' work, and we had to do a case, and so I used myself as my case. And when I started to write down my case of myself, I mean, I just, the emotions, because I've been trying to suck it up and move forward and press on, like you
Right.
said, I'd pick myself up and push
Going.
on.
Right.
The emotions just came out, and I just poured my heart into that. And I think every student in the class responded to mine,
Yeah.
to my post,
Yeah.
but they all said, hang on, it gets better, hang on, it gets better.
Right.
And then
Right.
another occasion, I was at a peptide certification, and I jokingly say the entire class were all mold flunkies, the entire class of doctors. I think there was one doctor who hadn't had mold that was in
Right.
that class.
Wow.
We're all in there trying to figure out how to fix ourselves.
Right. Right.
Anyway, I bust into tears in front of that entire classroom.
Yeah.
How embarrassing is that? Like, I don't even know these people,
Yeah.
and they were like, hang on, it gets better, it gets better. But I didn't always have that belief. I didn't believe most of the time that it would get better.
Sure.
How did you keep pushing through when you didn't have belief that it would get better? Or did you have belief it would get better? And if you did, how did you have it so that you could maybe give it to someone else?
So, well, first of all, I just want to respond to you saying that when you burst into tears in front of everybody and that it was embarrassing. I truly believe that there is something about being vulnerable and being able to really share. And I think doctors really need to know how serious this is. I think anybody that goes into the mold route probably knows to some degree whether they've been through it or that's just kind of the route they're taking. I think for me, so I think vulnerability is it's really important so that you can really see that it's not just, a lot of times you come in with a sickness or something and you get a pill and you get better. And this is not that. This is a longer journey. It is multifaceted. You have to fix your home, which is one of the most emotional parts. Part of me wants to say, I don't know how I got through it. But I do know, I do know. And I say, I don't know how, just because it is so extreme. And sometimes I was hanging on by a thread and I was not believing. I literally believed the lie that I would not get better, because when you are so sick for so long or just so sick, there is really nothing to tell you. Even when someone tells you to hold on, there is nothing to hold on to. For me, my faith in God is extremely strong. I've had it ever since I was small, ever since I was young. That is the only thing I would say. That's probably the foundational part of what has given me hope. Because when you do not have a pill, when you don't have, because sometimes too, you don't know the road, even the protocol is pretty, it's a little vague from the standpoint of, you have to do something for a few months or 4 months, and then you have to do some testing, and then you figure out where to go from that point. And that doesn't give you hope, because you're just taking, you want to see the road ahead of you, and you want to see when you're better. And with mold, it's not only a long road, but it is very uncertain, and it is a roller coaster. And so when you're up here, you're going, I can do this. I can do this. I got hope. I know I'm going to be better, because you can believe the things that either your doctor says or people say, around you. When you get down to the bottom, all those negative thoughts come back. And for me, my faith was the only thing that could combat that. But I did something called limbic system rewire. It was a program from Brooklyn and Brooklyn
Annie Harper.
Hannah.
Okay, Brooklyn Hannah.
Yeah, Brooklyn and Nick Hanna. And I was a little bit leery of it at first because I had become a life coach years before when I started coaching. And I just felt like I didn't need any life coaching. Not because I thought a lot of myself, but because I was a life coach, and I could use a lot of those skills. So I was able to do their whole program, but without some of the coaching, which was really good for me because I didn't have the means to be able to, because everything's expensive when you're healing from mold. That helped. Within 1 week, I took a free seminar. Within 1 week, I was thinking differently, and it was almost like I had taken medicine. And not to say that every day was like that after that, but it gave me a foundation. And they based theirs, through like the Bible and through faith. And that was really good for me because that was the foundation that I was coming from. And so for me, making sure that my brain was getting some help, other than, and I was also seeing a counselor. That was helping me to have hope and to actually say, okay, I can do this even though tomorrow doesn't look like I'm going to have the answer. So,
one of the things that's classic with mole is one day you can feel fantastic, the next day it could be the worst day of your life,
right.
and there's no link between why and how you feel, and a lot of people
Right.
are always searching for what did I do, what did I eat, what was I,
How to fix it.
and I
Yeah.
call it chasing 1,000 rabbits, and I
Right.
say the hardest thing that I have to do with my mole patients is to not get them to chase 1,000 rabbits because
Right.
all get into this fix it mole or
Yes.
this fix it mode.
Right.
So what could you say to people to help them maybe go through what everyone instinctually wants to do?
Right.
I did this even myself as a provider, and I'm embarrassed
Sure.
to even say this, but I will just mention
Yeah.
it. One night I remember sitting at my table and, I'm having a good day, a bad day, a good day,
Yeah.
a bad day. And and it doesn't make sense because when you're
Right.
you're sick and then you get well. You're
Right.
not a great day and then a bad day.
Right.
And I remember sitting at my kitchen table going, well, am I just in an abusive marriage and I don't know it?
Yes.
I mean,
How do I get out?
how do
Yes.
is this the
Right.
body keeping score?
Right.
My head your
Yes.
head just fills with such crazy things, or a lot of my patients do that.
Yeah.
You may not have
I
done
did.
that. And
I did the same thing. So I went into fix it mode constantly. And I think that's sort of where you're going here is that what I would do is I would pull everything at like, is it this? Is it that? And I think reminding people, and I know that you do this, and this is what is so important. Staying the course, that's first and foremost. It's kind of like, if anybody's ever been through anxiety and if you've ever had, or panic attacks and you've had to try a medication, the one thing they say is just stick with it. And you're going, no, everything in my body is telling me I'm going to get emotional because this was me when I was having anxiety attacks. No, everything is scary. I literally could die. That's how you feel. And so, and everybody's saying, but stay the course. And you're going, no, there's no way I can. So part of it is really trusting the people that are around you, more so your doctor. I think having the conversation is, especially with patients, is the most important thing, because things that you can kind of head off at the path. Because when you're by yourself at home and you're having that low day, I would go to, oh my gosh, am I dying? Oh my gosh, am I this? Do I need to go to the emergency room? What is this feeling in my arm that I'm having? What is this thing? I would feel, it almost was like an ice pick stabbing me in the
ice
head.
pick pains.
It was one of the worst things, but as you do, your body just goes, okay, it's fine, I'm okay. But then you kind of come to the, reality and you go, what was that? And then you start to say, well, maybe that was this. Maybe I have a brain tumor. Maybe this. But from what I have learned, your brain has been so damaged that you go into these not only just negative cycles, but you constantly go back to, well, I got to fix what's wrong. I got to fix what's happening because you don't have that one pill that you can take right then. So I think that making sure that you head people off right at that point where you say, hey, you're going to feel a roller coaster, and when you do get to the bottom, remind yourself that everything you're feeling is mold.
So I had a patient one time after she got well. She looked at me and she said, if you had have told me 2 years ago I would be here, that I wouldn't have believed you. And she
Yeah.
said, you've just got to trust the process.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so I learned
Yes.
from that. You've just got to trust the process.
Right. Right.
Okay.
It's so
So
important.
today, how you feel today, I know you're not completely through your mold treatment.
Correct.
How
Right.
does today compare to your worst day? And what did your worst day look like? And what does today look like for you?
Yeah, so today is wonderful because I am feeling better than I have. My best day today, so I have, a lot of symptoms. I did not wake up with a headache today. I woke up today feeling from an emotional standpoint, feeling pretty good. I did have to combat some of those, oh my gosh, am I going to always feel this way? But I know better to allow myself to sit in that or even to think it again. And so I come back to truth. I personally come back to biblical truth that God did not design me. He did not create me to be sick. He does not want us to be sick. And I have to tell myself, God does not want you to be sick. And that sort of brings up the next thought that, then why aren't you healing me?
Yeah.
Why aren't you healing me? But it puts me back into, but you know what I'm going to trust? I'm going to trust that this is the journey that I'm on and that you've got me and that you're going to help me. And just as my brain, you're going to have to ask me the question again, because this is what our mold brains do is I completely forgot. I've done that a couple times, but I've been able to kind of get back. Oh, you were talking about like my
How
worst
did
day
your worst
too.
day, what did your worst day look like?
Yes.
And what did your best day look like?
Okay.
Or today, where you are today. And let's pretend you're having a good day today.
Yes.
Even if you're having a moderate day today.
Right,
What did your worst day look like?
So my worst day looked like not being able to get out of bed, not being able to drive my daughter where she needed to be, not being able to go on the date or whatever it was that we had been planning or we had completely canceled 5 times before. And here I was again sick. I would have vertigo. I felt completely emotional. I'm completely off emotionally. I couldn't even say that it was anxiety or panic or anything. It was just off. And so my worst days, because I had so many different symptoms, and one day I would have vertigo and I would be in bed or I would wake up and the whole room would be spinning. I dealt with vertigo for probably 2 years straight. Now, it wasn't every single day, but it was a 2-year chunk of time where I very rarely had days where I didn't feel it. And so when you have vertigo, you can't drive. Sometimes I tried to drive on a good day, but I would have an anxiety attack and didn't know I was having it, and would have to pull off on the side of the road and would have to call my husband to come and get me. So there were a lot of days for me that were so bad that I could not get out of bed, could not think straight, could not remember what I was needing to do, could not make sense of anything. And, going back to my career, I think in losing my career and with all of that, it would bring all the negative stuff back. So that would be a part of my worst day. So physical symptoms, but emotional symptoms of not having another child. The grief was over the top. And I suspect that my grief, my anxiety, all of that was even worse because of having mold illness. And so when you have, I think, things just stacked one on top of the other, you're not just feeling one thing. So I wouldn't just have vertigo. I would have vertigo. And on top of that, I would go, oh, I can't drive. On top of that, oh, I can't function. I can't feed my family tonight. There is just so much that piles on top of it. And at the same time, you can't function.
Yeah.
And then you're not being who you truly are. Today, on my really good days, I am so grateful. I feel joy. There's also something that I feel like is really important, that's a part of this. Um, and there's probably a lot of people that feel this way too. You probably felt this as well. But I think when something like this happens to you and happens for so long that you really feel like a victim, and it is hard to get out of a victim mindset. And one thing that happened to me just recently is honestly, I think God shook me and kind of woke me up to some things because I was not just starting to feel better, but I think that God was actually showing some things like what I had learned through this process. And one of the things that I learned was that I'm not a victim to my circumstances. And it's easy to say that, but to actually feel it, I think part of it is you have to remind yourself that you are not a victim, that even though this thing may be going on, you are not your circumstances. So it goes back to like how do you deal with all the things on your worst day? You have to remind yourself that even on your worst day, that healing is coming, that even in this process, so let's say it takes 2 years, to fully heal, which is so scary because when you've been through it already, and, I've been through the protocol, once almost to the end and now again, it is scary, but I'm reminding myself that I have some choices in this. I have choices to choose joy over being terrified of what has happened to me. I have choices that whatever the next appointment brings is what the appointment brings. Um, so yeah, I think that faith is a huge part of this journey.
So I'm going
So
to ask a really loaded question.
yeah,
Okay. And I
uh-oh.
don't know that I would even want to answer this question.
Okay.
Have you gotten any gifts out of this?
Whew.
That's a big
That's a
question.
big question. If you had asked me that 2 years ago, I would have probably said absolutely not. Actually, I might have said hell no.
Yeah.
I mean, because I was still a victim. I was still a victim. I was still a victim to everything.
And it's okay to say no. I
Yeah.
mean, because it's a hard place to find a gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But I
so,
have. I
okay.
have.
And bravo to you. I mean, bravo to
Yeah.
you. And I'll share my story, but I want to know what the
Yeah.
gift is that you've gotten out of this.
The gift for me is understanding how to go through something hard and still be able to have joy.
Okay.
2 years
Share.
ago,
Share.
okay, 2 years ago, all I wanted to do was to get out of it. That was it. Just get me out. I don't care how, I don't care where, just get me out of it. And now I can be in it and say, man, I have a choice. I have a choice to wake up. Even if I don't feel well, I have a choice to be joyful or not. And I think understanding that I have a choice is a big deal. The gift for me is that I learned how to not be a victim for the first time. I think I had been a victim to my circumstances most of my life, and I never took authority in my own identity and in my identity in, I think, who God created me to be. And so I let every time I felt bad completely steal, rob me of joy. If I felt bad, I wasn't going to have joy, and my whole family was going to feel it, and everybody around me, and I was going to lose opportunities. I was going to not show up. Another gift that I have received is learning how to show up no matter how I feel. I feel like that's a huge gift.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Okay, well, if there's one thing that you want to leave the listeners with, what would that one piece of advice be?
That's a loaded question, too. um, I think it is that you can truly heal from this. Along with make sure that you have I always sort of say it's either threefold or it's fivefold, depending on how far you want to go. I think you need a functional doctor. You need a best friend that you can tell all of this to, that is not going to judge you for your symptoms and is not going to judge you on your bad days. Then you need to find someone. You need to get connected, not online, not on a Facebook group, because those can be heavily negative, and you can't get out. You can't get out. You need to find someone who has healed from this, not a doctor, because you've already got your doctor, who has healed from this, who can help you along the way, who can remind you you are going to get better. There is a path forward, and you're going to, on your hard days. And then I think that you should have a counselor, because I think that's really, really important, because you can deal with trauma. And part of what I think we go through as mold survivors, we go through mold as it's a trauma. It's a big trauma because of how it not only affects you, but how it affects your family. Some people have lost spouses over it. Some people have lost homes, multiple homes. They've lost all of their finances over that. And a lot of that is my story. I didn't fully lose my spouse, but I mean, we were on the brink, because when your spouse doesn't understand it, obviously it can cause more issues, and then you're taking on more stress. I think also sometimes you need to go to marital counseling, because sometimes that really is important to understand that you went through what you went through, but your spouse went through it too. And so I think having all 5 of those things, or as many of those things as you can have to support you, because you need support in this.
Well, I am just so grateful for you. I am so grateful for you here.
Thank you. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you. So thankful.
We're going to do this together.
Yes. We're going to get through it. We are.
All right.